Well, of course, the season's just finished, and that means only one thing. We are back with our weekly programmes of My Life in Football. And wow, what a way to start. I mean, last series we started off with Mr. Tony Gow, and this week, and of course this year as well, start off with somebody even bigger than Mr. Tony Gow. We've got Mr. Ian Allinson, and of course it's fantastic to have you on, sir. And I know I've met you a couple of times with your with your business hat on, coming into to Harlow, but it's fantastic to sit and have a chat with you today.
Yeah, thanks, David. Appreciate it. And it's when you say Tony Gow, I think I've got a bigger belly than Tony Gow, so it's that's the only thing I'm probably bigger than him at. So,
well, I actually spoke to Tony during the week, and he's actually sunning himself. I'm sure he said he was in Barbados, and he sent me a picture of him behind the back of palm trees behind the back of him. So yeah,
his bank balance is bigger than mine as well, so he can afford them.
But I mean, we'll start at the end and then sort of quickly skip to the fun very quickly. But I mean, of course, now at the moment you're with your son Lee at Hendon. So I mean, enjoying yourself there. We'll go more into what you're doing.
It's good. I mean, I'm it's a different role from me. Just trying to support Lee really from behind the scenes and trying to grow the football club. What we spoke about earlier, they're fans-owned football club. Some really good people involved. But we just need to try and grow ourselves from where we are. From a personal point of view, I don't think it helps that Hendon, which is in London, is playing in the Southern Premier League. Again, I think they're an Isthmian League club, which should be in the Isthmian League, playing local derbies, and all them sort of things would help if we was to be moved sideways. But again, we've got to wait and see where we are with that. But they're good club, good people, and hopefully we can take them forward, bring some different ways of working, some different ideas off the pitch, but also on the pitch, trying to help Lee and support Lee and give him as much advice as I can going forward.
I mean, if we start off then at the very, very beginning, shall we say? I mean, how did yourself sort of get involved in football in the first place? What was your first dealings with football? Was that sort of mum and dad taking you to local park for a football team, or yourself for school, or what? I mean, what was the very beginnings?
It started in Hertfordshire, Stevenage. Joined a local club called Boreham United, played for them until I was sort of 15. And then they broke up, and really the best team in the area at the time was Bedwell Rangers, which is still going at the time now. And I signed for them at 15, had a year with them, and then moved on to having some trials at a few clubs. So I had a trial, and then having a trial at Colchester at 16. Went okay, got invited back for a second trial, and I just had one of them games where everything you do and everything you touch come off. And I went from scoring 4 goals, and before we could leave the arena, which is in the Army playing grounds in Colchester, Jim Smith had grabbed myself, my parents, and had me in the room, wanted me to sign for them. And that was 1973-74 season. So I signed for him in 74, and 1st of July 1974, I signed for Colchester.
Right. I mean, looking at this, I mean, from figures I've got, I mean, 308 appearances, 69 goals. So it was an enjoyable time.
Sorry, mate, just 1 second. I just had a message come through. I really apologise for that. It was a lovely time there. Yeah, I had 9, 10 great years there. Given my first opportunity with Jim Smith. He gave me my first debut, which would have been in the April of 75, which came on against Preston North End, who was managed by Bobby Charlton at the time. And then the following year he left, and then a manager called Bobby Roberts came in, who was brilliant in terms of for my development. And that's where I did play, over 300 games. I think I played 200 consecutive games, and that's when the opportunity came. It wasn't the fact is that I wasn't happy there. It's the fact is I wanted to try and progress. We were a team that was fluctuating from Division 3, Division 4 at the time. And it was just the fact is I'd scored 52 goals in the last 2 years. It was the first time they'd played me as a centre forward rather than a winger. And there was an opportunity for me to go and progress. And I had to try and grab that opportunity. They'd made me a new offer, which I didn't think it was as good as the previous offer. And then, we went to tribunals and everything. And the story is that I should have signed for Fulham. Everything was done with Fulham. I actually went to a pre-season game where Harlow was playing Fulham. I said to Malcolm McDonald at the time, "Do you want me to sign my contract now in the boardroom in Harlow?" He went, "No, take it home." So I took it back to Sudbury in Suffolk, where I was living. And on the Sunday, Terry Neal rang me from Arsenal, asked me if I wanted to sign for Arsenal, a club that the whole family has supported all our years. Went and see them 9:30 on the Monday morning and signed by 10 o'clock. And Malcolm McDonald was still waiting for me to turn up at 12 o'clock to sign for Fulham, which was a little bit naughty. But I think when you're given the opportunity that I was given, and given the opportunity to try and play for Arsenal first and foremost, because I was coming from a Division 4 side to a Division 1 side at the time, it was going to be a massive leap in my life, and I just wanted to test myself, because if I wasn't good enough, then you can always go down the leagues. But I was 24 years of age. I'd had, as I say, 9 really good years at Colchester. Scored a lot of goals, gave them a really good service, but it was time for me to try and better myself.
But I mean, in that first year at Colchester, I mean, the bit I've got written down here in front of me says you actually won Young Player of the Year in your first season.
Yeah, I got presented that award when that was my debut against Preston North End. So that's when Bobby Charlton presented me the award. I was 17 at the time, and that was the Young Player of the Year award. Yeah, exactly. But
what was that like, though? Getting a trophy like that, but also getting it from such a cult figure.
I think it's one of them, because when I first started off, I was a little bit homesick, and the first sort of couple of months was difficult to try and understand what was happening in your life, because obviously being at home till I was 16 and going away and living in a hotel for a few nights and living in digs, and I struggled to settle for the first sort of 2 or 3 months, but then after a while you get used to it, and then I had a really good spell for about 6 months, and to get the Young Player of the Year when there were so many good players there at the time was a fantastic achievement. But to actually meet Bobby Charlton, who was still in his prime really in terms of where he was, World Cup winner, was fantastic. Came on second half, nearly scored a goal, but again, then I had to wait sort of 3 or 4 months again to be given another opportunity. So it was just about being patient. But I think, and this is what you've got to do in football, patience does help you. Some players, I feel, want to move on and play quicker than they're probably ready for, and these are some of the things that you find in the non-league. The players move around a lot of clubs because they're just not quite ready to wait for their opportunity, and when they get their opportunity, they just want to move on too quickly.
And of course, I mean, not being funny, as you just said, you said there about then moving on to to Arsenal. I mean, what was that like? Because I mean, a bit like yourself, and you just said your family. I'm a massive Arsenal fan myself, and I mean, what was that actually like, though? Getting that sort of phone call and from Terry Neal, and just saying, like, we want you to come and join us, and even walking into those marble halls sort of for the first time must have been incredible.
It was, and then I ended up in, as I said, they showed me around, and Terry Neal, and I ended up in Ken Fryer's office with Terry Neal, and Ken Fryer's desk and chair seemed a lot higher than where I was sitting. I was quite low, and he was looking down on me, and we spoke about finances, and we spoke about the terms of the contract, and I felt the contract that Fulham had offered me was a 4-year contract, where Arsenal's was a 2-year with a year's option. And in the long term, Fulham's was probably going to be a better deal. And I said this to Ken Fryer, and Ken Fryer looked at me, looked down at me. He said, "There's one difference there, Ian." And I said, "What's that?" And he went, "This is the Arsenal." And made such a big difference to me. And I went, "Yeah, okay, where do you want me to sign?" And then I said to Terry, "I've got to let Malcolm McDonald know." So he's not going to be happy. He said, "Leave that with me. I'll sort that out." And they sorted it out amongst themselves. So, and then the first training session was a bit of a shock, really, because I felt going in. Obviously, you've got. They're not under 23s. You had a reserve side in them days, so you played in the football combination, which was a fantastic league to play in. So the whole week was guided to playing on a Saturday or a Tuesday. So everything you did was exactly the same. And then I felt on the Monday, the first day back in there, that I would end up training with the reserves and things like that. And I was thrown in with, Kenny Sanson, Graham Ricks, David O'Leary, Pat Jennings, and all these people. And that was my first training session. And that's where I stayed, and they were really good in terms of the way that they looked after me. They made you feel a real part of what what you was doing, and I had 4 unbelievable years there. Loved every single minute of it. Obviously, the 4th year under George Graham was tough. I didn't think George really fancied me as a player. So, though I played a bit of a part, I didn't feel I played the part that I'd done the previous 3 years. And obviously,
that must have been weird though, because I mean, and again, I don't know if this is true. This is what I've got written down. He said Ian's debut for Arsenal came in a shock League Cup defeat to Walsall on the 29th of November 1983. Signalling the end of Terry Neal's tenure as manager of the club.
Well, it did, because there was protests outside the ground. I actually thought I had quite a good game that day as well. So it was strange in terms of the way I felt on my debut. I had a good game. As a club, we were underperforming because obviously we shouldn't have lost to Walsall. But there was massive protests outside the ground afterwards, calling for Terry's head, which was a bit disturbing. And then obviously the club decided to make a decision on that week, which in one way probably helped me, because I think they give it as an interim basis to Don Howe to look after the club for a period of time. And Don, he was one of them that, he took to me, he gave me fantastic opportunities. And I think over the next sort of 2 years while he was in charge, I played probably 80 odd games, or involved in 80 odd games, and had a really good spell in times there. But he's the one that also gave me the opportunity to play up front in some of the games rather than on the wing.
And of course, I suppose it'd be wrong, and I did ask your son this when we were talking the other week when we had Hendon on the Monday night show. I mean, talk to me a little bit about the living legend that you did get to play with, and in Mr. David Rocastle.
Yeah, he was just, I mean, let's just say David, I mean, obviously he's not here no longer, which is very, very sad, but he was a fantastic player. And he was part of that little group with Paul Merson and Mickey Thomas and Gus Caesar, and all these people all come through at that stage, and they were a great little bunch, and they all hung around to each other. They all played together. They looked after each other. And as I say, when you look at Merson and Rocastle and Thomas, they had a really good football careers. And unfortunately for David, obviously, it was cut short and far too early, but he was just a gifted footballer. Travelled with the ball unbelievably well. But it wasn't only that, he was just such a special person. He was a fantastic lad, had a great way about him. And as I say, it's just one of them. It's just, you look back in your careers, and I know we had the time at White Hart Lane where we both scored, and we both become celebrities for a period of time after that. But it was just fantastic in terms of the way he developed into a player. And as I say, it's just so sad that he was taken from us far too early.
I mean, there must be some stories of some nights out in there with that lot.
Well, there's loads of stories, but when you look back at it, they were just characters in them days. I would say drinking was a bit of a culture, not just with Arsenal, with a lot of the clubs. Liverpool were notorious of being in and around that area, and it was just really it was just having a bit of fun, really, looking after yourselves and going out and relaxing. But one or two of them probably took it a little bit too far in terms of not coming home at night and turning up for training the next day straight from where they've been out. And but that was the culture of football in them days. I mean, when you look at it now, there's no culture in that in terms of the way people behave. You have to look after your body, and I think the clubs treat people differently now in terms of where they are.
I mean, one of the things about, I suppose, talking on Arsenal, I suppose, is when you ever hear people, ex-players or on the TV or even commentators or whatever else, it always makes me smile when they talk about, they'll talk about Tottenham and they'll just say the word Tottenham. They'll talk about people like Liverpool and they use the word Liverpool, Manchester United, etc., etc. But you'll always see that when they talk seriously about Arsenal, it's always the Arsenal. And it's really sort of like as if they are something extremely special to either play for or be around.
Yeah. People have said to me, look, a lot of the way they look after you, David, the way they treat you, the way they do things for you is exceptional. And people used to say to me, all these other clubs, you can say they're professional clubs, and it's not me being disrespectful to them at all, but a lot of them would be like 4-star, 5-star hotels. And Arsenal was always a 6-star hotel. and that's how it was always portrayed in the football world at my time, is that Arsenal, maybe Liverpool, were always that little bit better than anyone else in the way that they portrayed themselves, the way they looked after themselves, and the way, as a football club, they wanted to be known as. And that's the way I've always said it to people: is Arsenal a 6-star if you're taking Liverpool a 5-star. And that's not being disrespectful to Liverpool, but that's the way I felt it was portrayed to me the right way, explained to me. And I honestly, I haven't been to Liverpool and seen how they work in terms of that side of it. But all I can say is Arsenal were very, very special in the way that they looked after me, the families, the players, the staff, everything.
I mean, do you see a little bit of sort of a similarity from, when you just said, when the likes of Merson and Thomas and, and Rocastle, that came through at Arsenal? Do you see a little bit in what's going on at the moment with the likes of, Saka and Martinelli and the likes of those all coming through? Do you get the same sort of feeling as a supporter now, maybe, that things could be going the same way as it went previously?
I think without doubt. And I think all these clubs have spells where they bring 4 or 5 through. I think Manchester United did. I mean, obviously they had the class of 92 at the time, didn't they? Which they've never really been able to replicate that, I think. And you're right with the Arsenal one, is that, they brought sort of 5 or 6 through. Then they went for years dominating youth football. And they've been in the background a bit over the last few years. Chelsea, Manchester City and teams like that have dominated youth football. They've dominated, football in terms of the UK. So, but Arsenal, with what they've produced over the last sort of couple of years, clearly shows that their method is working. And these players coming through and developing from where they are makes a massive difference to finances. I'm not sure whether Arsenal got it right when they were letting people's contracts run down. And I think that took probably a lot longer to put right than they expected. And I know the finances would have been quite tight. I think everybody agrees that if you're a football club now, your turnover's got to be massive, substantially massive. You need good owners. You need owners that are going to support the football club. And then, as you see, that each club that becomes part of the Premiership now, it just to stay in this league is a massive, massive bonus. And you see clubs financially needed to survive.
And what was that like then? So we get to sort of, George comes in, as you said, and you end up leaving Arsenal sort of 86, 87, that sort of area, late 87. And then going into sort of second division Stoke. So, I mean, that, no disrespect to Stoke, but is that, as you just said, if you've gone from maybe a 6-star hotel down, to something that's not a 6-star hotel, was that a little bit more of a, wow, hang on a minute, very hard to get used to?
Without doubt, it was a massive culture shock. It probably, when you look back at it, was probably the downfall of my career in terms of because I went down quite quickly from there. I went to Stoke, tried to make a go of it, didn't settle. Very quickly, I got a move back to Luton with Ray Hartford, and I felt I had a good year there. Then they signed Roy Wegley. But once I'd left Arsenal, it was very, very difficult to try and compare and compete with what Arsenal was like compared to some of these other clubs. And that, again, there's one thing I'll never be disrespectful to some of the clubs that I've played for or been with, but they were never in the same financial situation where Arsenal was. Stoke tried extremely hard. They had a fantastic ground. They got great supporters. Didn't take to me very well. I think most of the supporters felt I'd ate all the pies up there, because that's what they used to seem to me. And I think getting the move back to Luton was good from my point of view. Being a Stevenage boy, I was living in Stevenage, and as I say, it went well for Luton. The only thing, again, I think a lot of people agree to you, is the plastic pitch at Luton was really poor. It helped Luton in terms of where we played at home, but also our away record was very good. And I think we finished 6th in the Division 1 then. That year we got to the semi-final. No, we got to the semi-final of the FA Cup and won the Littlewoods Cup, but I was cup tied for that because I played half a game for Stoke.
And that was that the one against Arsenal?
Yes, yeah. The Luton won 3-2, yeah.
The one we try to forget.
Well, I did the team talk that day, and I told them what they had to. It was ever so funny because I did a preview in the Shoot magazine. You remember the Shoot magazine?
Yeah.
And obviously being Luton, obviously playing for Luton, I want Luton to win, but also being an Arsenal supporter, I'm happy if Arsenal win it. And in the end of it, I did a rundown of each player individually, and so you could even go and look at it now. And at the end of it, I said it'd be a high-scoring game, and Luton will win 3-2. And lucky enough, Luton won 3-2. But I think Martin Hayes missed a penalty, didn't they? Andy Dibble saved it. Yeah. It
was one of those pull your hair out days. Yeah, I must
Yeah.
What's going on here? Yeah, and it was weird because I think he was like, for season, it was Arsenal went there for 2 years. Then didn't Luton go there for 2 years as well, win it and lose it? And I think it was a bit like that for a couple of years.
They lost to somebody, didn't they? I think. Yeah, I'm just trying to think who it was. I'd left. I think I'd left in that second, towards the end of that period. I'd gone to Colchester by then. But as I say, it was just one of them that, I think, going back to your question, it was very difficult once I left Arsenal to try and continue your career at that level.
And was that why you probably ended up back at Colchester?
I think it was easy. I always stayed in touch with Steve Foley, who was the manager at the time. He was a caretaker manager. I went back there. I felt to help him out. They were near the bottom of the table. Colchester for me had been a bit of my life for sort of 9-10 years, and it was the right fit. I enjoyed it, to be fair. I never expected one day that Jock Wallace and Alan Ball would walk through the door and be the managers of Colchester United. And Steve, I felt it was an opportunity for me going back to Steve to start to learn the coaching element of what I wanted to get involved in. Steve Hetz, who was also an ex-Reading centre-half, was also involved in it. And I felt it went really well. Steve was obviously the manager. He was letting me take the warm-ups. I felt I was learning from what he was happening. And then, as I say, I agreed to go and join them, which I did. And then one day, as I say, Jock Wallace, the old Rangers manager, and Steve Hetz, and Alan Ball, the old England midfield player, walked through the door, and they took over for about 18 months. And very quickly, I wasn't part of Jock's plans. And within a year, he was saying that I could leave if I wanted to. And that's when I decided to go into management with Baldock in the early 90s.
So, I mean, was it something that you've always wanted to do, the managing? Because, I mean, let's be honest, if you mention your name now in the sort of non-league circles or, around football, from step one, down, I mean, you're probably the Alex Ferguson of non-league football, because, I mean, you're very well respected and somebody that everybody probably would want as their manager if they had the choice.
Well, I think when you first go into it, I mean, there's a lot of knocks you take in football, and I think as a manager, you want to go in as a manager, and you want success. If you don't get success, it's really difficult. I think there's some really dark days and weekends, and it's how you manage them. And the one thing I'd always taken for advice and spoke to people, and I always remember John Steele, the old Luton Dagenham manager, used to say to me, never get too high, never get too low. And that's the way I've been. In fact, I probably get low some weekends, but I never get too high. And some of the cups and leagues that I've won over the years, I've never really. People have often wondered me why are you not enjoying it? I just take it all in and look at from the outside. But I never get that high. But sometimes some of the defeats you suffer, you try and work out. And when you're looking at it, you're not just suffering for yourself. You're suffering for a team, you're suffering for players, you're suffering for supporters, and you want them all to enjoy themselves. And when you get the good times, you have to enjoy it. But as I say, it's not one of them where I get very high, but sometimes, I would get low. But it was something that I wanted to do. Was I ready for it? Probably not. I went in as a player manager, didn't enjoy it. Was if you look back now, some of the things I did there were completely wrong. I still felt I was doing team talks. I was playing 45 minutes and should be doing a team talk at half time, and then doing the team talk at the end of the game. And they're all the things that I shouldn't have been doing. But maybe I went into it too quickly and never really understood what a player manager was. And I got that wrong. And then decided that, going from Baldock, once you get the sack somewhere like that, there ain't many places you can go, and went back to Stotfold. Applied for a job there, got the job in the United Counties League, and we had sort of 3 or 4 really good years. Went off to or few places. I think Boreham Wood and Harlow and these places. And
What was it like? What was it like at my old club, Harlow?
I loved Harlow. Jeff was a character, and they were a great family, though, weren't they? The Bothwells were a great family. And it's like everything, David. What you got to understand is when you get a manager's job, you never get it when they're top of the table or mid-table. You always get it when they're rock bottom. And we took over from the old Enfield manager, funny enough, and they were rock bottom. We managed to keep them up, and the next year we had a good year. But it's like everything in football. It's timings in terms of where you are. We produced some good players there. When you look at some of the players we had a good run in the FA Cup. I think we lost to Bedford, FA Cup 4th round one year, and they went on to play Peterborough. And that was a bit of a blow. I think that just, but we used to get good crowds there, didn't we? So, when you think of Harlow in the early 2000s, some of the crowds that we used to pull in there were amazing. And then I went off to Boreham Wood for my first stint, then went back to Stotfold, and then back to Boreham Wood for my second stint. I think it was nearly 10 years that one was. And then,
let's pick it up then from your second stint at Boreham Wood. I mean, what made you actually physically go back to Boreham Wood in the first place?
Well, Danny rang me up one day and just said, look, I mean, I'd gone back to Stotfold, and what we'd done is that Lee and all his mates were playing at Potton, and I managed to get them all to come across to Stotfold. And we went from a team that just survived relegation and won the league very easy. We were a good side. We were a very, very good side. I was lucky again. When you talk about groups of players and you talk about the Arsenal group, I had Lee and his mates were all playing together, and they come across, and the Donnellys all come in, and we produced a very good side. Very, very easy to manage because they got on very, very well. But they all knew their jobs, and they were very good at their jobs. So we won the league, and then Danny rang me back up again and just said, what are you doing? We can have a coffee with me, which I did. We had a coffee. We went, this is the situation. The club had been relegated to, I think, Ryman Division 1 North, but it was waiting for, there was an appeal where the best relegated side would stay up due to Halifax's demise. So we're just waiting for the FA to sanction that. So we knew we had every chance of being in the Ryman Premier, which eventually did happen. Rebuilt the side, got rid of some players that we didn't feel were right for what we wanted. Rebuilt the side, managed to finish, I think we finished 5th or 6th from bottom that year on the last game of the season with a 0-0 draw. And then the following year, we got promoted via the playoffs. Got into the playoffs last game of the season, beat Aveley away 1-0, and then played Kingstonian and beat them 2-0. And then we're in the Conference South. So again, that was an experience for a few years, and it was probably a few years of survival in terms of just trying to understand what the league was about, trying to rebuild the squad. And then when I say we got lucky, we was notified of a player called Junior Moraes who was looking to get out on loan from Wickham. I went and watched him at Beaconsfield, liked the lad Lee Angol who played there with him, went back to Wickham the next day and said, look, if I take Moraes, can I take Angol? And it sort of changed our season around. That season we finished really well. Finished at just about 8th, I think. And then the next season we managed to get both of them for the year on contracts playing for. And they were probably the difference in terms of their relationship, their teaming up as a pair, as a centre forward and a number 10. Probably their goals was the reason why we got into the playoffs. And again, we ended up getting into the National League.
But I mean, there was a game here that's highlighted here, and it surrounds a player that we were speaking about actually, before we started recording the show, and somebody that Harlow, I know he's absolutely loved at Harlow and absolutely loved at Enfield Town as well, and that's a gentleman by the name of Mario Notto. And I mean, there was a very famous incident that Mario was involved in 2011. Playing for yourself. Can you tell us the story? Yeah.
Well, it was down at Havant, and we were in a relegation battle with Havant. We were down there, and we were losing 1-0. They had a player came off, and he actually broke his leg eventually, but he came off and was laying on the sidelines. And the referee then obviously gave a bounce up to us on the halfway line, and the balls ended up in the back of the net from the halfway line. and it actually wasn't Mario. It was a lad called Ali Shabang did it, but Mario got the blame for it. And it was a lad called Ali Shabang, and Ali obviously just belted it from the halfway line over everyone's head into the net. And the first, listen, as I said to you before, for me, football has to be done in the right way. And I allowed Havant to walk through from the kickoff and put the ball in the empty net, and we lost 2-1. And after the game, some of our players were really disappointed with it. Actually, we allowed it to happen. But as I said, you've got to have some morals in football, and that was one of the ones I always felt was the right thing to do. And just by doing that, I didn't realise what the reaction would be. By the time I got back onto the coach at 5:30, I had the Radio 5 Live, I had Talk Sport, and all these people were ringing me for interviews on the coach, which was crazy. And then it ended up, I think I got the non-league sporting gesture of the year or something in a presentation at Chelsea that year as well. So again, it was something that never really was important in terms of what we got out of it. It was just the fact is that, as I said to you, in morals in life, and you've got to accept that we shouldn't have scored. We wouldn't have scored if it had been open play, and allowed them to walk the ball in an empty net.
I mean, what was it like when you went into your management career, especially most people would know you from probably the last two clubs you were at with Boreham Wood and and St Albans, especially with all your appearances on the television in games and stuff like that. I think you appeared in more games on the TV than Alex Ferguson, I think. But I mean, with it though, I mean, did you try as a manager to bring in sort of some of the bits you'd learnt through your career, especially somewhere like an Arsenal and Luton? And did you sort of try and bring in things that you'd learnt from managers previously, or things that you'd noticed that the club would do, not necessarily the managers would do, but the professional clubs would do into those sort of scenarios?
I think so. I think without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, the biggest thing that you have to look at is that discipline's massive in terms of what you do. Timekeeping for me is massive. Dress code's massive. Behaving correctly in the right areas at the right time in certain areas of the football club, and not letting your standards drop. Train as hard as you can, play as hard as you can. And if you're not quite good enough, no one's ever going to blame you for stuff like that. We have to try and then develop them players, or try and help them players to become better. And the one thing I've always done, and people will tell you this, that I've never dropped somebody or got rid of somebody without personally speaking to them, or giving them an explanation on why they might not be good enough for me, they might not be good enough for the football team I'm manager of, or they might need to go away and express themselves. And I've seen players leave Ian Allinson and leave the clubs he's been at and done better in other clubs, but that's the fit. Some players fit in, some players don't. But the one thing I've always tried to do is give somebody an explanation of the reasons why. I've tried to be really honest with everybody that's worked under me. And I think if you look back at it, I think players will respect what I've done for them. Even if naming the side on the Saturday, if I'm leaving anybody out, I will take them into my office or into a room and give them an explanation of why they're not playing. And I think that's the right way to do it. I'll just use one example. When I was at Arsenal, and I got dropped for the Little Woods Cup final, and I went and see George Graham. Now, bearing in mind, I played in the semi-final against Tottenham, scored. Doesn't give me any divine rights to be in the side at Wembley. I then played every single game up until the cup final, and then didn't even get in the 13. So 11 players, 2 subs. So I went to see George Graham, and I said to him, George, can you give me a reason why? Not George, Gaffer at the time, or boss, whatever we called him. I said, could you give me an explanation or a reason why I'm not even just in the 13 or on the bench? And his explanation was, well, look at it this way. He said, I'm the manager. He said, no, I don't have to give you an explanation, and walked off. And that day I said I would never, ever treat anybody like that. I think players deserve the reasons, and they might not even agree with my reasons. But I just think it's right to talk to somebody correctly and give them a reason or an explanation of why they're not part of what I'm trying to do or what the club's trying to do.
And what was it? I mean, with that as well. I mean, what was it like? I'm sure I've seen you. Well, I know I've definitely seen you on the TV with the FA Cup runs and stuff for Boreham Woods and St Albans. What on those sort of occasions? What is that like? Trying to keep the the sort of the players sort of feet on the ground and try and get their heads in the right space, especially if you've got league games in between as well? I mean, what is that like? And are you sort of now sort of like an expert at it?
I think when you say that, it's very difficult because I was speaking to somebody this week, and it's been notorious that when somebody has a good run in the FA Cup, they have a really poor period afterwards. And this season, I know we had a really poor second half at St Albans last year, and no explanation of why players had reached a height and just couldn't get back up there again. But I also spoke to Luke Garrard at Boreham Wood, and they had a really poor second half of the season last year after they got to the fifth round of the FA Cup. And I think it's just players' mentality. I think it's trying to make them, or trying to get them back to the standards that they've set to reach where they've got. And I don't think they reach them standards anymore in terms of on a playing side of it. An old manager, Brian Williams, used to be manager of Hitchin going back years ago, always said to me around about February, March time, just go and make 2 or 3 changes and move 2 or 3 players on and bring 2 or 3 new ones in, and it'll just give the change room a spark and a lift. And I've never really done that, but I think he's probably correct. But because of loyalty and because of the way players have played for the football club and played for me and been part of our lives in terms of where we're going, I didn't think it was right to sort of move some of them players on in terms of that side of it. Now, that's more of probably a ruthless side as a manager, which I probably should have had a bit more, because that might have been the kickstart that the season needed last year in February. And other clubs have been exactly the same, is that when you have these runs in the FA Cup, the season does suffer in the second half of the season.
And I mean, you know, you went from sort of left Boreham Wood due to work commitments, etc., and then sort of a few months, 6 months later or so, came back and started in at St Albans. What was there a lot of difference did you feel between the two sides, between sort of Boreham Wood? Because I mean, Boreham Wood a sort of conference, and if I'm right in saying St Albans were what, Conference South?
St Albans are Conference South, and they were 12 points adrift at the bottom of the table when we went in there, so it was going to be a tough task. But I looked at St Albans as a team in terms of their players, and they had a really good side. They had very good players, and they just probably needed to be managed in the correct way and motivated the correct way and asked to do simple jobs. And I remember we got 12 games to go. We looked at it and we thought we're going to need to win. We probably thought we need to win half of them. In the end, we won 8, drew 2, and lost 10, and stayed up last game of the season. And then we had 3 or 4 really good seasons. We had one poor season when COVID hit, where I think you said something to me earlier about Enfield in terms of never really got an out-and-out centre forward. And if you don't get them sort of personnel in your team and you don't even got your goal scorers, I think a lot of clubs struggle because your goal scorers turn defeats into draws and draws into wins. And that one year, we only had probably Joe Ciafano, who scored 18 goals for us, which he did a fantastic achievement. We never had nobody else around who scored goals, so we didn't score enough goals. And then the following year, I brought Sean Jeffers in, who scored 60-odd goals now in 2 years. So when you look back at it, your goal scorers, I think you always look at it, you've got your playmakers, you've got your destroyers, and you've got your goal scorers, and that's the way you look at your teams. If you've got your playmakers, that's fine. If you've got your destroyers, they're your defenders, they're gonna help you. And then your goal scorers win your games of football, and that's the way I look at it from that side of it. And also, I thought you need a good goalkeeper. A good goalkeeper in any team gives them confidence, especially the defenders.
And did you, when you went through your sort of management career, did you keep your same sort of backroom side all the time, or did you sort of go different, or?
No, most of the time we had a few changes. At Boreham Wood, we had a few changes up, and then I brought Luke Garrard and Mario in, and they were good because they were ex-players. At St Albans, when I first went in, I brought Lee in because he was still on that verge of being able to play, but knew some players that was going to help us on that side of it. But I had Ian Donnelly help me, who was a great footballer playing for Hitchin and Olsey in them days, who helped me on 2 occasions back at Stotfold. And then I had Chris Winton, who came and helped me, who's now manager at Kings Langley. So I look back and, Mario's still involved in football. Luke's manager of Boreham Wood. Chris Winton's manager of Kings Langley. Lee's manager of Hendon. So Ian Donnelly's son is manager of Stotfold. So all those people have been involved in and around me, have all, gone on to do better things and been involved in stuff like that. So it's pleasing from that side. And, hopefully they might have taken on some of the things that I might have taught them. And if so, that's great from their point of view. And I'm pleased that they're doing so well in the areas they're in. We've got David Noble at St Albans. I brought him into the coaching ranks this year. He's had an unbelievable year, fantastic year. But you know, he for me will be a he'll be a top coach or a top head coach in the Football League this year. Not this year, in time to come. He's very good.
Disappointed though for Luke at the weekend?
Really disappointed. I spoke to him last week and wished him all the best. And when they were 2-0 up, I couldn't see him losing it, because they're one of them sides, when they get in front, they're very dangerous. And I said, when you look at it, 97th minute was a blow, really, because I felt if they could have just wavered that out, they'd have been into the final. And when you get into the final, anyone that plays against Boreham Wood knows they're going to be in for a tough game. And that's the way it is. They've built this reputation over the years. You've seen what they've done in the FA Cup for the last 2 years. And you're not going to get an easy ride against them.
I mean, and that's probably a question that you've probably not been asked before, but is there any concerns around sort of Boreham Wood? Because the concerns that I had was around the fact that, again, today it's been announced, of course, that Arsenal ladies are playing more and more games at the Emirates. So by them sort of pulling more and more games away from there for income-wise, I mean, would that be a case that you feel that they would need to get up in maybe in the next couple of years before that sort of income may not be there?
No, I haven't really spoke to the people. I haven't spoke to Danny for probably a year or so now in terms of where he is. But I know he never ever relied on that sort of money. He never relied on the Arsenal money. He always said that was a bit of a bonus. So if it's different now, I couldn't give you them answers. But in the past, he always made sure that he had the right finances in place, and the Arsenal was just a bonus, really, in terms of where it was. But if you look at his stadium now, he's turned his stadium into a fantastic stadium.
Amazing place.
And obviously I think it's a good place for Arsenal play. But as you say, they're taking 5 games away from there next year. But as I say, the stadium itself is amazing. The pitch is amazing. And I don't think he'd be in a position where he'd have to rely on Arsenal's finances to help him. I know in the past he didn't. I know a lot of the stuff he did in the past was his own money. And I think he's probably kept it exactly like that. He doesn't want to be relying on other people, because if they do pull out, it would leave you in a situation where as a club, you might struggle.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I think the playing service at Boreham was probably one of the best playing services in non-league football. I think,
without a shadow of doubt. And I know Arsenal are heavily involved in that, but that was part of the contract that Danny wanted with them, that they would help, support, maintain, and lay that pitch. And that's probably a £400,000 or £500,000 pitch. That's the difference.
Absolutely. So, to the present day, I mean, you ended, sort of left sort of St Albans at was it end of last year?
End of September.
Yeah, end of September, and then now, of course, you with your little boy, shall we say, up at Hendon.
A lot bigger than me.
Tough old time of it this year. I mean, managed to stay up there, and he's, from what I've seen as well on social media, 5 or 6 players, your main players, the likes of Nico Moore and that, have managed to get their signature on for next year. And I suppose one player I'd like to ask you about on there would be, and I'm sure he was at your place, and please tell me if I'm wrong, was Daniel Matasuka.
Yes.
Because he was a player that used to play at Harlow, and he was loaned from from Southend at the time when he came down to play for us for Harlow. I think he played one game against Needham Market on the year when we were picked with the 100 points, 100 goals. He had their star striker in his pocket and was taken straight back and was on the bench for Southend against Hartlepool the following weekend. I mean, how good of a player is he?
He's done well. He's done really well. I think I first come across him was probably 18 months ago when he was at Oxford City, and he done really well there. He then went off to Weymouth and was 3 mornings a week, I think it was, in Weymouth. And he's another one that just didn't fit into the manager's plan. So the manager made him available. He's obviously a Barnet boy. So we signed him on loan for the last 3 months of the season. And he's probably one of the main reasons why we stayed up in the end, that somebody like him came in. He gave us enough clean sheets to obviously get some results. And again, it's one of them that, he's just a really good player that he knows his jobs. He's been given a good background in terms of where he is. He knows how to portray himself. He knows how to head it, kick it, and do the good things, but he can also play football as well. And as I say, it was a good signing from our point of view. Where we are now for this season, I think there's a few other clubs involved. one of them could be your club, Enfield, involved in it. So it's just one of them where we just got to see where we are. It's a bit of a merry-go-round at the moment, David. In terms of the seasons haven't really come to a stop. Each player is out there talking to as many clubs as they can, and then somebody's just got to make a decision. That's why I'm pleased that Lee's managed to get the 4 or 5 players over the line as quickly as he's done.
Yeah.
Because it just settles us down now. We need to go and get some legs in there. We need some energy in there, and hopefully with the targets we've got, we can do that over the next sort of 6 to 8 weeks.
And of course, he's a Japanese under-21 international as well.
He is, yeah. I didn't realise that. Lee showed me that. I didn't realise that.
That's only because I used to follow him quite regularly just to see what he's up to. But I mean, with it though, I mean, with your career, first of all, just finish, and then we'll finish on Hendon as well. What would you say was your favourite match as a player, and what would you say was your most favourite match as a manager?
Oh wow!
We could add favourite goal in there as well while you're at it as well.
Yeah, I think if you go back to there's probably 3 that stick in my mind. I told you. Yeah, that's 3. I mean, obviously, Boreham Wood getting promotion to National League was fantastic. It's a great achievement in terms of a club that's as small as what Boreham Wood was at the time and the crowds we got. You've got your Forest Green victory last year for St Albans. Was fantastic, but that's a one-off game. I think the Boreham Wood one was over 42 games, and then playoffs would probably take preference over that. My favourite game as a player, I suppose you look back at the Tottenham game. It's easy to say that, but probably making my debut against Walsall was probably another one of them that I was actually in that first team changing room, and I had the number 11 shirt on, which was a fantastic achievement in terms of where I was at that stage. Favourite goal, I mean, the Tottenham one was a missed kick. No one knows that yet, but I've just told you that. So totally missed kick that, and Ray Clements, unfortunately, it fooled him. But I think you look back at it was a goal I scored at Watford going back many years ago, and it was when I sat from the halfway line, it weren't far away, and it was one of them. It just bounced down, and for some reason, I decided to shoot, and it flew into the top corner over Steve Sherwood's. But it's probably never had no cameras in them days. It's so far ago. And it's not like today where you've got every camera in every part of the ground that's showing every goal you score. Mm-hmm. But as I said, all the memories I've had, all the clubs I've been manager of, I've really enjoyed, and there've been some good people. The supporters, I've been so fortunate that the clubs I've been at, I've had so much support from the supporters in terms of I've not really had I can't even say anyone's turned on me, which has been fantastic. And I look at some of the supporters, Harlow were fantastic. You could always have a beer with them afterwards. You look at the Bournemouth supporters were always fantastic. St Albans have been brilliant. And some of the smaller clubs have been really good. And I've just been very fortunate that all the clubs I've been a manager of, that I've had that sort of respect from these people. And I've not had to really leave anyone because I've been forced to leave them, apart from probably St Albans in this period, where they felt a change was right for them at this stage. And you have to respect that.
So, I mean, with Hendon going forward, then, I mean, what do we expect to see from Hendon if it's in the, in the Southern League next year, or if it's in the Isthmian League next year? Because I've seen a couple of bits and bobs on non-league maps that says you're in the non-league, Isthmian Prem next year, and another one that says you're still where you are. So, yeah. I mean, what is there different plans with you and Lee if it's the Southern League? And
I think it makes a massive difference. First and foremost, in travelling, our travelling cost will decrease by £20,000 if we get into the Ryman League, or the Isthmian League, should I call it. So that straight away is money that can go back into a playing budget, which makes players become a bit more available. Plus, your pool of players will be bigger because people don't want to travel west every single away game. And let's be fair, I'm not being disrespectful to Plymouth Parkway and Truro, who are out of the league now, Western-super-Mare, Tiverton. They're long journeys, and your Saturdays are wiped away. Towards the end of the season, I know we did Western, Tiverton, and Gosport in 1 week. We did 700 and something miles. So a massive difference in terms of the way we can plan and prepare for next season. We're just now waiting on the leagues to make a decision. We heard it might be this week. But the quicker it's made, the better it'll be for everybody, because then we can plan and then go out and get some maybe different players that we felt at this stage that wouldn't be coming to us.
Well, I've just seen non-league maps have got an up-to-date league table.
Yeah.
You might not be very happy. The latest one that I've seen, but it says Beaconsfield Town, Bracknell, Chesham, Dorchester, Gosport, Hanwell, Hayes and Yeading, Hendon, Merthyr, Met Police, Plymouth Parkway, Poole, Salisbury, Swindon, Tiverton, Winchester, with the new ones: Hungerford Town, Didcot, AFC Totton, Sholing, Basingstoke Town, and Walton and Hersham.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, because you know where you are. If you put a dividing line down where Hendon is, all the way down the country, Horsham and Bognor are further west than us. So how are they still in the Ryman League?
Well, on one of those, I'll answer you when we're not actually recording.
Or Isthmian League. And I know which one you're going to tell me about. And you did right.
I mean, just to put it in context, the teams that that would be in the Isthmian Prem: Billericay, Bognor, Canby, Carshalton, Cray, Enfield, Folkestone, Haringey, Hastings, Horsham, Hornchurch, Kingstonian, Lewis, Margate, Potters Bar, Wingate, Cheshunt, Concord, Dulwich, Chatham, and Whitehawk.
Great league. Fantastic. Put that dividing line down straight, and there's two teams that should be playing in the Western League, for me, Southern Premier League, if you're going to do it correctly.
Yeah, and I think it's what it is, though, isn't it? I think the line is like sort of like that, isn't it?
It's not a lineman, is it?
No, you know what I mean. The line's sort of drawn in and sort of like all over the place, just to try and make it fit.
It's a squiggly line.
Yeah, because I had an interview with the guys from Mousehole, and I said to them, I said, you do realise with Truro now getting promoted into the Conference South, you're going to be the most hated club at step 4.
Yeah.
Of course, I think from where Truro are playing, Mousehole are another hour and a half south of that. And he was saying to me, on most of their journeys, which is what he said people forget, he said, we will need 2 coach drivers for every journey.
Yeah.
Which is crazy, isn't it?
Crazy.
Absolutely mental. But Ian, I don't want to take up any more of your time.
Thank you.
Absolute star, and thank you very much for joining us. And of course, we've got your son joining us again next week as well, so that'd be fun. But we wish you all the very, very best with future with Hendon. Thank you for joining us today.
Got my number, David. You've got my email address. If you ever need me, just give us a call.
I will do. Thank you, Ian. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And thanks for everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, mate. Take care.